Welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast with your hosts, Joshua Poniatowski and Alex Taylor. Let's talk football.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Poniatowski. Here with me is Alex Taylor. How's it going, Alex?
What's up?
So this week we're going to be talking about running back top 5, wide receiver top 5 positions. But before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the news of the week. Honestly, there's really not much news to report.
This is that awful time of year where it's like training camps haven't really got into way. Like OTAs are done. We're just kind of sitting around, so a little boring. But.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of the news, like from the beat writers and the coaches. A lot of times, coaches are just talking up players at this point, draft picks, like everything ideally is
everyone's
positive.
in the best shape of their life.
Yes,
Everyone
exactly.
lost fat, gained muscle.
Yeah.
The joints are super nimble right now.
Yeah. So anything positive that comes out, is what it is. But I mean, I think if anything negative comes out, that might be a red flag because most coaches aren't talking anything negative.
Yeah,
I haven't
for
heard
sure.
anything yet. So.
Well, yeah, but then sometimes even with a grain of salt, like they might say that just to kind of spur the guy into something. Like,
That's true.
Maybe he is sucking, and maybe they want to kind of, put him into check a little bit.
Very much true. Yeah. So, but I mean, as far as the news goes, Dak was in a walking boot. I think it was around July 4th. So about a week ago. And a couple of days ago, he wasn't. He just said he was doing it for precautionary reasons because he had some soreness. What that means, not really sure. Maybe he tweaked it in practice or whatnot. Or he's, doing something off the court. So.
Definitely something to monitor as we get into training camp. I mean, the legs, he's not like a hardcore scrambler, but the legs are important to him. Definitely makes up, adds a couple rushing yards and touchdowns every game. So, well, not every game, but.
Yeah, and I think, obviously his stock's tied to CD stock as well once we get into the wide receiver. So,
yeah, definitely.
With most of these guys, that's kind of how it works. Joe Burrow, though, did say, as a direct quote, he said he wanted to play for another team.
Oh, my gosh.
Insane. He said, I really want to play for the U.S. Olympic flag football team. So,
that would be sick.
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, so I mean, he's still on the Bengals. He was. I think he was talking about like, what if CD and Tyreek and him and like a bunch of guys got together. I think they were talking about it in a couple of years to create a flag football team. They're like, absolutely want to do that.
So. Or like JJ back, rekindle the LSU days.
Yeah, JJ for sure. So that would be an elite flag football team. I don't think anybody would have a chance, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the rest of the world is absolutely flag football. If our elite guys actually jump in, which we'll see if they do or don't. But
yeah, I mean I think there hasn't been a gold medal type of football situation for U.S. Olympics. So I think if there's
obviously the rest of the world is going to try to veto it as much as they can, just because they know it's like. Well, as soon as that opens up, it's just an automatic gold for the U.S.
100%. So yeah, not really much news. So we're really just gonna kind of jump into the top 5. We're gonna do running back, wide receiver rankings. I'm gonna share my personal perspective on like how I draft my top 5 guys. That first round, what I'm looking for. And Alex, please, chime in whatever you think.
Sure.
Your vibe is on that.
I'm excited. I feel like this is gonna be a fun episode.
Yes.
So
I'm stoked for this too.
Everyone loves a good ranking.
Yes. Yeah, and it's always interesting to see who you got and why. It's the big reason I think a lot of people.
All right, so we're going receiver or running back first.
So
we'll
go receiver first, and I'll let you get started. I'll let you go through your rankings, but before we do that, the way I draft my top 10 guys is I am absolutely looking for league winners, like highest upside as possible, highest ceiling. I'm typically not looking for like.
Oh, so you're a little bit more of a boomer bust guy. I'm kind of the opposite.
Way more boomer.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, better not have like 4-point games on me. Like I don't want that in the first like 2 rounds.
So you're looking more consistency in the first couple rounds. Yeah, I see.
Definitely. And you'll see I think kind of. I left off a pretty big name off my top 5 because of that reason. So, yeah, sure. So I'll dive in. Ready?
Yeah, go for it. Got it.
Number 1, CeeDee. He's just a beast. Just a phenomenal receiver. Played every game last season. 14 total touchdowns, over 1,800 total yards. He had some jet sweeps in there. Some of those were rushing. Cowboys offense with Dak, they sling the ball. They're always slinging the ball. I just think locked in as far as like me being, maybe something like JJ or Tyreek might have a little bit more of that upside. But to me, CeeDee's just tried and true. He's producing every single week. So I just love him as my locked in wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I have CeeDee as well, so there's not much of a shock there as far as who our number 1 guy is. Yeah, nothing's changed in Dallas. His target share with Dak was like 29%, which was like one of the highest in the leagues. And with him, he literally can score from anywhere. Like it doesn't matter where they are on the field, whether they're in the red zone, which he was number 1 in red zone targets last year. And he actually had better yards after catch than Tyreek, which is kind of crazy.
Wow, I did not know that.
So even in the open field, him getting loose and breaking out for some extra yards, he's just kind of that number 1 guy.
Yeah.
I think that the negatives is the contract negotiations. We talked about that last time, but not that big of a deal to me. And it really is high price tag. Like you probably have to have a top 3 pick to even consider maybe top 5, I guess, if some of your draft
like your league setting, like maybe if it's a 2 QB league or something like
That's
that,
true.
or maybe if there's 0 points per, even if it's 0 point PPR, I mean, he's still probably top 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would anyone who gives benefit to half PPR, full PPR. I mean, I think CeeDee's top 3 overall pick. So.
Agreed, 100%.
In my number 2 spot, I got Justin Jefferson, Jetson, as he likes to be called. Here's a guy who, from a skill-based perspective, is probably my number 1 receiver. I just, he's dealing with JJ McCarthy.
Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, that's a big question mark. I don't really think I don't watch a crazy amount of college football, but I watched a handful of Michigan games, and he was. I don't know. He kind of seemed like a game manager of sorts. He kind of just was doing his part, which is fine. If the game they need to manage is throw it to Jefferson 15 times a game, like I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
I know his year last year was a little disappointing. He dealt with a hamstring injury, and then right as he's coming back from that, Kirk goes down. So it was frustrating. But sometimes that frustration can lead to his own motivation, and he could propel him even higher. And now he knows with no Kirk, maybe I got to do even more. Maybe I got to really put on my back. So again, probably my number 1 skill-based receiver, but my number 2 from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, I personally had him at the 3 spot, but I feel like we just forget how good Justin Jefferson is. Like he's
insane.
Yeah, he's just so damn good, and the literal only reason that he isn't number 1. I feel like is because of quarterback, right? Like you said, JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold, maybe even be the starter, at least for the first couple weeks before they decide to roll out JJ.
I'll be curious on like when that announcement comes. I mean,
right.
I don't know. Darnold, I don't know.
I feel like they probably brought him in to compete, right? Maybe not give it to him right away, that like they did with Caleb. I think Caleb got the keys right away to the kingdom over there in Chicago. But so I mean, with a hammy injury, there's always concerns that could be re-aggravated in the future. But his upside is just too high, and if he stays healthy, I don't think it's a question that he finishes as a top 5 receiver. Like I just don't even think, even with JJ, and rookie quarterbacks rely on their go-to guy, and it's going to be him. So
for sure, I think they know, everyone knows what's going on, and they're going to hopefully just pepper him with targets all day long.
Yeah, I think we're
okay. So my number 3, I got Tyreek. Man's been around for a long time. Everyone knows what you're getting with him.
Yeah,
fast. Most receiving yards in the NFL last year. He's getting up there in age, sure, but like I don't, and eventually once he loses a step, we'll see what happens to his game if he's able to like kind of transform a little bit. But for now, he's, by all reports, is still incredibly fast. So until that's happened, stops, he's going to be locked in top 5 this year. I got him in my 3 spot.
Mm-hmm.
Miami offense looks potent. Everyone saw what they were doing last year.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I had him above JJ, so he's my number 2. Everything you just said, he actually has gotten better since coming to Miami, like, which is crazy to think about, being on the Chiefs offense, but 2 back-to-back 1,700-yard seasons. The past 4 years, he's finished as a top 2 fantasy wide receiver, and I think one of the years he was like number 6. So high ceiling, consistency. He is 30, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. I don't think he's going to fall off yet. And Vegas did have him and CD as far as like receiving yards. They were both around 1,300 for the prop bet. So there's some faith there.
I mean, both of them.
Yeah.
Other than like that's just like injury possibility affecting it there. I mean, they should both easily crack 1,500 as long as they play 90% of the games.
For sure. But that was the highest as far as receiving yards go was him and CD. So agreed. Great pick there. Mm-hmm.
All right. In my 4 spot, I got Sun God. I'm on Ross St. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a guy who finished 3rd in fantasy points last year. Love his game. Real physical, real aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Not afraid to go over the middle. A little more of a possession guy who also has, crazy speed.
Yeah.
A big kind of factor that I think gets overlooked is Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, staying. It seems like every year Ben Johnson is a big like head coach candidate, and every year is like, I just kind of like hanging in Detroit and telling my boys to sling it.
Right.
So high potent offense. Goff spreads the wealth. I think you could be like a little concerned with just like because they have so many targets. Laporta, Montgomery, Gibbs. If J-Mo finally gets his shit together and is a legitimate like number 2, we'll see. I don't know. So I could say you can maybe be a little worried in that regard, but I think he's just built into that offense well. I think it suits him. I think he just is a very, again, like I said, I like consistency. I think I see him as a very high floor guy.
Yeah.
He might not have crazy deep threat speed for like insane like boom games, but I think his floor is very high.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. He's like the only, and I have him at my 5 as well. So, again, just a couple, one position difference, but he's the only like true slot guy on this top 5 list. He just gets so many looks, and they move him all over the offense, and they throw the ball consistently. Like, I last year Goff took, won me a couple games just because he threw for 5, 6
Goff was a great late
and,
quarterback last year.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree. And, you are going to, if he performs well, potentially get you into the playoffs simply just on his back. So yeah, got him at my number 5 spot. And yeah, he was a top 10 yards for catch. And he's another guy that they give red zone targets to. Over the past couple of years, he's been a top 10 within the 20 and even within the 10. It actually increased as far as the percentage chances they give him in the red zone.
Just he's so damn strong for a receiver. I mean, he's kind of. I mean, you watch that guy work out with his dad that was Mr. Olympian. I mean, So yeah, like they're not afraid. He's not like some little frail guy that they're afraid to utilize. Like they're down to chuck it to him, and make those contested. DB like draped over him. He'll make those catches. He'll come out strong.
For sure.
All right. And then to finish it off in my number 5 spot, here's a little spice. I'm going to, there's some big names I'm not picking. I'm not picking Chase. I'm not picking A.J. Brown. I'm going Mr. Rookie sensation Puka Nacua, who finished last year 4th in yards, 5th in fantasy points. And here's, he was phenom, kind of came out of nowhere. Everyone's like, waiver wire like magician where everyone's like, are we really gonna spend this much money on him? And he absolutely paid out. One thing I kind of like, a lot of times we talk about touchdown like regression to the mean. Here's a guy who, for as high as he finished, he only had 6 receiving touchdowns last year, whereas everyone else in the top 15 fantasy finishers all had 8 or above.
Oh, wow.
So I think this is a guy who could actually get, if he even gets like 10, 11, 12, which I think is very reasonable considering, some of these guys are getting 14, 15 receiving touchdowns. I think he could get even higher. So I think I know he kind of was shocking last year, just based on the receiving yards and coming out of nowhere. But I think there's room for him to even improve. So yeah, I got him in my number 5 spot.
Yeah, I mean, similar to CD, he had like a 29% target share. He was Matthew Stafford's go-to guy the entire season. For me, the only reason I didn't put him in the top 5, because I was right there with you. I was considering Puka, AJ Brown, was because of Cooper Kupp coming back, being healthy. Their target share split was about 29% on both sides. So not many other people were getting the ball in that offense except those two. But so, that worries me a little bit. And when Kupp did come back, Puka was still elite. Like, he was still great. But
absolutely,
his targets went from, when Kupp was out, like, he was averaging like 15 targets a game or something crazy like that. And then when Kupp came back, it dropped down to like 9 or so. So he didn't break that 10 threshold, but they're quality targets. He's still getting yards. And like you said,
he's not getting first DB, if Kupp's taken like, top corner. So
That's true. Yeah. So we won't have as much competition on the outside. Maybe that changes this year, right? With Kupp being a little bit older, maybe they switch it up on defenses. But either way, there's two guys.
Some new respect out there. Yeah.
Yeah. That are elite that, they're going to have to guard. So I do like the pick. I think there's huge upside there, especially with the touchdowns. And maybe the touchdown, regression last year and why he didn't see it at such a high rate is because they didn't really target him in the red zone. I was looking at red zone stats. He was around like Jahan Dotson level and OBJ as far as red zone percentages go. Yeah, so it wasn't great. But maybe Sean McVay, notices that and is like, all right, we need to get our dude more involved and get him some more touches in the red zone. But I think
Kyren was also just like hogging everything, and he was producing. So it was kind of like, until someone can stop that man, like why bother?
But I was just about to say Kyren had a huge that was a huge reason why that happened. And we get into our top 5 running backs. I think I'll bring some of those stats up. But yeah, I think it's a good pick. Puka at 5. I think I have him like 6-7 range, 8 based off AJ Brown and some of the other guys. But yeah, he's right around there for me for sure. There's a lot of upside that he could help you win your league. For me,
that was my top 5.
Yeah, so,
now let's see what you got.
Yeah, this is where we differed as far as the 4-5 spot goes. So I had 5. I'm on Sun God, and then number 4 I had Ja'Marr Chase. With Joe Burrow healthy, again, 29% target share. All these guys are getting looks, and for me, that's a big part of being able to produce. Is you got to get targets, you got to get the ball in your hands, and I think with Joe Burrow healthy, Chase is one of those guys that could put up 1,800 yard season. He's got that athleticism, the talent to break out. I fought with this a lot because, similar to you, like, I do like consistency somewhat. I'm like I mentioned, I want a league winner, but the bad with Chase is like he has some stinkers, man. Like, he will put up like 2 points or 9 points. Like, I looked over the past couple years, and there were multiple games where he didn't break 10 points, but then he'll drop like a 60 bomb or something insane to make up for it. So that's the only reason he's a little bit lower on my list, but I still think the potential is there. Those two to connect and score a lot of points for you.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, like I said, I do value consistency a lot, and I had him. I took him in the first round last year and was very upset.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people think back on last year and just kind of like, oh, Joe Burrow got hurt. that's why he had a bad year.
Mhm.
And I think that's just like not telling the whole story, because he played 10 games with Joe Burrow, and in 6 of them he only scored in single digits.
Yeah.
And one of them he had that bonkers game where he scored like 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I'm sure, I mean, anyone who had him on a roster, I'm sure had like a 95% win rate.
Right.
Cool. He won you like
game.
1 week by a shitload.
Yeah.
All those other weeks he was a huge disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think just over his whole career, he's like that. So like, I mean, he's obviously incredibly talented. Just for me, that high, I want someone who is, I don't know if it's a mindset, I don't know if it's a game plan situation, I don't know if it's a Burrow situation, I don't know what it is, but for some reason they just aren't always on the same page. Something's like happening half the time, and if I'm going first round, early second round, I want someone more reliable.
You don't want to worry about that. Yeah. So, I'm going to be honest. I was on the fence with Chase. So maybe you swayed me as far as, if we were to do this again, but I just, with Joe Burrow coming back healthy, I feel like it's worth a shot to try.
I mean, when the guy's having a good game, it's absolutely must see television. Like, I mean, good. He's so electric.
Good. Yeah.
It's just annoying that you just don't get that all the time. And I don't know why that's the case, but
yeah. All right. So
and then so you said you had Sun God in the 5 spot?
Yeah, I had Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 5 spot. So really, so
just name your top 5 just like in order, just so and I'm pretty sure what you said, but
I had CD, so just like you, I had Tyreek in my number 2 spot over JJ, so we just kind of flipped there. So JJ number 3,
more guaranteed, more secure quarterback position, talent for sure.
And that is
at least at the moment, at least until we see what JJ can do in the NFL.
Right.
But I get it.
Maybe we've got a CJ Stroud in our hands, but very unlikely. And then Jamar Chase at the 4, and then Sun God at the 5. So really for us, there was really only one, some couple spots switched around, but Puka and Chase is really that big discrepancy for us. So yeah, I think we're somewhat consistent on the same level. And I'm going to be honest, the wide receiver tier, I feel like almost all of these guys, like there is probably like 7 to 8 of them that you are getting an elite wide receiver, elite production week in and week out. So
for sure,
it's really hard to miss. I feel like, in those first, 6 to 8 picks with these guys. So I think safe bets most of the time, but, high upside is for me, that's what I was saying, looking for in that first 5.
All right. Since I kind of led the way with receivers, do you want to lead the way with running backs?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm gonna jump into running backs, and so for me, I had tried and true Christian McCaffrey, CMC, the god of fantasy football, number 1 pick almost every year in the past decade. I know obviously JJ and stuff like that, but he's the guy. So number 1, he can literally win a league by himself. I think 72% of teams that drafted him made the playoffs last year. So literally, if you drafted him, you were almost guaranteed to make the playoffs. And then once you got into the playoffs, 30% of the teams won the championship who had him. So literal league winner at the number 1 spot. Again, his ADP is crazy high. You're going to have to get top couple pick.
I don't know. Even in almost every format, you can make a case that he's 101. I mean, I don't even know. Doesn't even really matter your scoring setting. I think he can go.
So you agree with that then? Same page, number 1.
Yeah, no, I have him as my number 1. I mean, 21 total touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
Over 2,000 total yards. Yeah. Talking about consistency, he did sit out the last game of the season, but of all the games he played, 13 of the 16, he was a top 12 scoring running back. And in the other 3, he was also a top 24. So it was literally never a bust game. His entire season, he was at least an RB2, while having an insane amount of weeks where he was the RB1. Just phenomenal player. I mean, And it's nice to see him kind of get back into a groove because he hit the scene. It was like awesome first couple years, and then he had like a couple years where he just kept getting hurt, and he was going like
Injuries.
first overall, and got hurt like immediately. And it was kind of like, oh, is this running back's a tough position. Is he maybe just not capable of doing it? And then it's like the last couple of years he's really locked in and just been solid. And I just think that offense, is just a juggernaut. The Niners, they just move the ball. They got a zone running scheme that just favors him very well. Plus plenty of perimeter threats to keep the boxes light. Does it all. There's really not a case for anyone better than, as far as a running back over CMC.
Agreed. Yeah, and they get creative with him in the backfield too. They're going to get their playmaker the ball when they need to. Why they didn't do that as much in the second half of the Super Bowl is beyond me. But we're not going to get into that.
Yeah. The Super Bowl performance was.
We're not going to get into that right now.
Frustrating. I don't.
Yes.
But yeah. And you felt bad for him. This is the fumble, and immediately you're just like, oh no.
So ridiculous. So ridiculous. But moving on, number 2, Breece the Beast. Jets running back. I know it's scary ever to pick a Jets guy, but he has that cowbell role. He was actually still recovering from his ACL injury. This is kind of like his first year and a half back. They typically say when you're recovering from ACL, you're about 70% within that first year. So he didn't even have his full explosiveness back. He sat out he was on a limited snap count the first 6 games of the season. So they didn't really open him up. He was actually one of my trade targets early. Like I tried to get him in almost all of my leagues. I was unfortunately unsuccessful, but he was on limited snap count first 6 weeks. And once they let him loose, that was it. He ended up finishing top 5 in 2023, even though he wasn't, that cowbell for the first 6 games of the season. Rodgers being there, even though he's 40, it's going to open up the box a little bit, give him an opportunity to get loose more. And this being his second year from an ACL, he's going to be 100%. He'll have that more explosiveness back, which is kind of scary to think about. So he's my number 2, tried and true.
I also have Breece as my number 2. Yeah, just a phenomenal runner, and I would probably say he's, as far as running back goes, if it was a dynasty setting, he's probably my number 1 dynasty setting running back as well.
Right.
Had 4.5 yards per carry last season on a bad offense. I was facing stacked boxes the majority of the time because they couldn't throw the ball at all. So to put up 4.5 yards per carry was impressive. He's also was sneaky the best receiving back last year. Had 76 receptions, which was the most, and also 591 receiving yards, which was also the most. You can maybe make the case that it's because they were fucking losing the whole time, and I'm sure a lot of it was some garbage time dump offs. But 76 catches, shows it's clearly he's capable of that. And Rodgers. Once he's back, he used to, Aaron Jones used to be a PPR machine as a running back. So, I think it's really exciting what is possible for them this year. I also have him as my number 2. Definitely clearly below CMC, but I think he's you'd be very happy having him in kind of like that mid first round, kind of depending on your settings.
Yeah, Breece, I think he almost had, it was like 96 targets or something like that for a running back, which is, bonkers. So, but so Breece number 2 for sure.
And with that snap count limited, 6 weeks.
So he's got huge opportunity to just break out this year, and everything in his favor at the moment. So this is kind of where our rankings switch up a little bit as far as where we value and we see players. So for me, my number 3 is Kyren Williams. He is just electric, and he was a top 10 running back within the 20-yard line, and within the 15-yard line, he was top 10. Like we talked about earlier. When they are in the red zone, they're giving the ball to Kyren Williams, and that's what they did last year. Craziest stat I've seen. He missed 6 games last year. So of 2023, he missed 6 entire games. So this is 30% of the season he was not playing because of injury or whatever the case may be. I look back the past 10 years, and the closest person to come close to this was like Le'Veon Bell. He missed 5 games in 2016, but Le'Veon finished, I think it was like outside the top 10. And, Kyren finished top 6 running back, top 5 running back. And that's never been done before. So when we talk about crazy upside, like CMC level upside, I feel like Kyren gives you that insane upside. Blake Corum, of course, was drafted in the 3rd round. People think he's going to eat into his workload, maybe a little bit, but, high injury risk. But for me, like, the upside is just so there that I feel like, I got to take him. I would want, him on my team putting up those insane numbers if he stays healthy. I couldn't even imagine. I feel like he would break some records. So.
I agree. I mean, I love Kyren. I had him coming in at the 5 spot, but he had 5.0 yards per carry last year.
Mm-hmm.
In my settings, I was looking at, I actually had him as the 4th place finisher in fantasy points, and that's with missing those games.
Yeah.
So absolutely nuts. I mean, it was 15 total touchdowns. He did have a little bit of receiving action in there, not like a crazy amount, like Brees, but he had like I think a couple like 200 yards and like 3 touchdowns. So he gets catches too, but also he just pounds it out. And McVay is just that offense is going to be rolling.
Mm-hmm.
They always do. The Blake Corum stuff, sure, he's there, but I think McVay's shown he can, he does a bell cow a lot. So, I love the guy. I think he's in a great position. I think people are a little like, was it real last year or not with him? I think some people have him a little low on their rankings for my preference, but teach their own.
Yeah, and he is McVay's guy for sure. Like, if McVay goes, that would be worrisome. I think from a dynasty perspective, I feel like they're connected. With him being a low draft pick.
Yeah.
But
I mean, they talk about McVay retiring like all the time.
It's so weird. He's so 40. Young too. So I don't get that either. But so that's why I had Kyren at my number 3. I feel like he could, these top 3 guys, potential league winners with huge upside. So my number 4, Spicy Bijan Mustard. The dude really got by Arthur Smith last year. If you bet on Bijan, I am not sorry for you. He was a rookie running back. I know everybody had high hopes on him, but like the fact that you went top 5, probably top 6 to get this guy who had never played a snap in the NFL, I'm just saying that's on y'all.
It worked with Saquon, people did it then, and he worked.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But they got a new coaching staff. They're actually bringing in the Rams offensive coordinator. Another guy from the Rams, Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson. So they're going to be running a very Los Angeles style type of offense. They got a new QB, right? As far as Kirk goes. So, the box won't be as loaded. We got a very competent passer. And really, I just feel like he's the most athletically talented, maybe outside of CMC, player that, is on this list, from being able to catch, run, block, really, do everything all over the place. The one thing I will say good about Arthur Smith was that he loved to dump the ball off to running backs. He was number 2 or number 3 in 2023 with targets around 68. So there'll be some fall off, some regression there, I think, from a PPR and catching and receiving yard standpoint. The coaches also mentioned that they were going to get Tyler Aguilar involved. They talked about it. They said he, in 2021, 2022, he was, 1,000+ yard rusher. He looked like to be the guy in Atlanta until they drafted Bijan. So a little worrisome, which is why he dropped. And Vegas only has him at like 6.5 prop touchdowns. So like we're talking like Zach Moss, James Conner, Najee type of production out of Vegas as far as their confidence in him scoring touchdowns. So that's why he's a little bit lower on my list. But the talent level is just there, and the opportunity is going to be there with the new coaches. So I like him at 4.
I actually had him in my 3 spot. Just most of the things you said. Young, explosive.
Yeah.
He had 1,400 total yards last year. Only 8 touchdowns, which was a little less than desired, and that's kind of what holds you back.
Yeah.
A little bit. But in the 1,400 yards was kind of sneaky, considering that offense was pretty bad at most times. It was kind of like
agree.
it didn't feel like he had 1,400 total yards, but he did. I mean, I am optimistic about Raheem Morris coming in. Former Bucks coach, no big deal.
Nice.
We gave him a shot.
Yeah,
kind of sucked with us, but he's a cool guy. I liked him.
Personality higher.
Yeah, no, he was a cool dude. Just a couple things thinking about. You kind of talked about like Arthur Smith used a lot of dump offs, but it's also because like they were losing so many of those games versus they're the Vegas favorite to win the South. I think the Bucks will, but it's whatever. You assume they're gonna be in the lead a lot more times, and so there would be more rushing opportunities than they had last year, just based on game script. But I could maybe as a counter say, with Kirk's injury and Kirk never really being a mobile guy in the first place, and now he's dealing with a leg injury, he might get asked to stay back in pass protection more or get subbed in for a blocking, more of a blocking personnel.
Yeah.
So just and that's I don't know what Kirk's mobility is going to be like. We'll see in training camp. Just something that could be a factor. But I think Raheem Morris knows. I think he saw what Arthur Smith did last year of not utilizing any of his skill position players at all, and I think he's gonna be like, I think pretty sure he's gonna come in and be like, all right, let's get the guys the ball that we need to have the ball. So I'm excited for him next year. Again, having my 3 spot. I think he's very talented. I just have him below Breece. I think Breece is just more reliable in that regard. But I think he's probably just as talented and capable as Breece. But yeah, so I had him at the 3 spot.
And then my last number 5 spot was Jahmyr Gibbs. Rookie last year, insane upside. Like his upside is so juicy. Similar to a lot of rookies, right? Limited playing time until a little bit later in the season. They really didn't let him loose until like week 7. Which again, he still finished a top 5 running back. He was a top 5 running back after week 7 forward. And that's when they gave him more touches, gave him more opportunities. Another guy I was trying to target early. Christian just would not give him up for his life. And he ended up finishing top 10 at the end of the season, even though he was limited in those early 7 games. If I know, obviously David Montgomery is there, I totally get it. It's worrisome that he is there. Vegas has Monty actually scoring more touchdowns than Gibbs by like 1 or 2, so fairly significant. But I don't want anything to ever happen, but like if for any reason Monty goes out, we're talking CMC level, maybe even more in that offense with how much they pass the ball and dump offs and get their running backs involved. He had multiple 10+ yard breakout runs, right, that lead to potential farther ones, those breakout runs that really lead to more. But his upside is just so high, and he's really, really only being limited right now to that potential Monty shared backfield. So that's why I like him at the 5.
Yeah, he's a guy I did not put in my top 5, and because of those reasons. I mean, obviously the talent is there. There's no denying that. The guy's shifty, fast. He doesn't look very big, but he plays strong for sure. But yeah, he's gonna lose. Red zone work to Montgomery. Also, just every other possession to or however they decide to split that backfield up to Montgomery. Yeah. And it is an offense that has a lot of other weapons. And has we talked about Amon-Ra's red zone proficiency. Then they got a Laporta red zone proficiency. So they're really good in the red zone with 3 other guys that aren't Gibbs. And not that he's not good, but it's just like the opportunity numbers aren't quite there. I mean, you got guys like CMC is also on a potent offense, and Kyren is also on a potent offense. But they don't have as much competition in the backfield as well. It's like 100%. He's competing just in the backfield and with the receiving options. So man, I love the guy. I mean, obviously, if Montgomery, something were to happen in that backfield, sure, then crazy boost his stock. For now, I got him in kind of like that around the RB7 range. So.
Gotcha. So those are my top 5. I know you still got one more listed there, so I'll let you.
Yep. Yeah, so 1, I got CMC. Obviously, we talked about 2, Brees. We talked about 3, Bijan. In my 4 spot, here's where we differ a little bit. I got Travis Etienne. Here is a guy who started the year electric, was amazing, and then kind of, I feel like right now he's getting faded a lot because if he didn't have a good, down the stretch, which I understand, absolutely. I just think if you dive into it a little bit deeper, there's, even with that tailing off at the end, he still finished 3rd in my scoring settings. So he was still RB3 on the year. Obviously, he wasn't great down the stretch, but he probably got you the playoffs just from that early season work. But so here's the thing. So it's also his touches and points directly correspond with the Jags run, because the Jags kind of started 8-3, were like the powerhouse of the AFC South, and then down the stretch went 1-5 and ended up missing the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now during their winning stretch, the 8-3 stretch, he was averaging 21 touches per game, and then during their losing bit at the end, he was only averaging 15.8 touches a game. So he's missing out on 5 touches per game during their losing stretch, and then his fantasy points dropped from 14.1 down to 11.4, so about like 3 points per game in a fantasy production. And now, so obviously that sucks, but the good thing about the Jags is they do have a Super Bowl winning coach, Doug Peterson, and I think I'm hoping he's able to reflect on the fact that, hey, when I gave Etienne 21 touches per game, we won a lot. Yeah. When I gave him 15.8 touches per game, we lost a lot. And obviously, they also, Lawrence had some injuries he was dealing with at the end of the season.
At the end, for sure, that
missed some games. So I think the end of that season was kind of like a black smudge on his year, and a lot of people are fading him in their rankings. And hey, maybe I don't know. Maybe Doug Peterson doesn't figure it out, and and gets Tank Bigsby involved or something. Who knows? But I think if they get him back to the 21 touches per game area, he should be a top 5 producing running back. So that's why I have him in my 4 spot. And then I said Kyren below him, which we talked about.
Yeah, and I mean, Etienne, he was top 6, I think, in targets as well. So he's getting the ball not just on the ground, but from a receiving perspective. Tank Dell did not look great last year. They put him in for some plays, and it just wasn't there.
Bigsby.
I'm sorry. Yes, my bad. Yeah, Tank Bigsby. Too many tanks going on.
The
Frank
Tank.
I think it was Doug Peterson. He was like, something a couple days ago, about a week ago. They mentioned that they're trying to refocus him. Attack the offseason. They said he looks good. This is his 2nd year. Running backs year 2, year 3. That tend when they kind of get their form. But I don't think it's going to eat into Etienne's production as a whole. So I like to pick. I personally don't have him that high, but again, he has the potential to finish as a top 5 running back, I think. Like a lot of guys we talked about.
All right. Well, I think it kind of wraps up our rankings for the week. And then what? So next week we're doing quarterbacks and tight ends?
Yes. So next week we're going to talk about quarterbacks, tight ends. We'll be a little bit different, I think, on how we go about that. I think it just depends on one QB versus super flex. So we'll plan that out.
True.
Before we come up with our rankings. But yeah, we're gonna do tight end, QB. Let us know what don't you agree with? What do you agree with us? Connect with us, Twitter, Discord, send us an email. If you want any questions answered, you hear about something specific on the show, send us an email, team@syndicatefantasy.com. Check out our website, syndicatefantasy.com. Up-to-date rankings, advice, and we'll catch y'all next time. Go steal a championship.
Let me know how I was right and Josh was wrong.
Yeah, other way around. Other way around. So we'll catch y'all later.
Peace.
Bye.